I just want to talk briefly about project performance. And the purpose of my presentation will be to look into how the public and the private sector can improve the delivery of their projects. Just to start off the discussion, I think one of the things that I just want to point out is that when we talk about project performance, we usually look at it in terms of how one can go about to meet the requirements of stakeholders. From a project management perspective, when we look at the aspect of stakeholders, we look into how you can go about to meet the needs of your primary stakeholders who are directly involved with the project. We also look at how you can go about to meet the needs of secondary stakeholders who are indirectly not involved with the project, but they have an input in terms of the outcomes of the project. There has been a lot of research which has been done in relation to project performance. A lot of the research which has been done has primarily looked at the internal side of things in terms of how project performance can be improved. And the basis of my presentation is just to look at it from a contemporary point of view. What are some of the issues that organizations need to focus on? In terms of project delivery, one of the things that you'll find is that there are projects which will entail both the private and the public sector. There are projects which will only entail the public in terms of delivery. And the reason why I just want to bring in the two together in looking at both the private and the public sector is because there's some research which has been done, which I believe, if are not well paid attention to within these two sectors, are likely to have an impact. So when we look at the aspect of project performance, one of the things that we need to ask ourselves, what is it that needs to be done now? And I think that from my own research and from the work that I've done with colleagues as well, one of the things that we have found is that both parties or both the sectors need to look into how they can go about to integrate digital tools. I think when you manage any kind of a project, the key challenge that usually comes in, especially if we are talking about big or mega projects, is how you go about to manage the data. The data that you manage in a project will comprise of both quantitative and qualitative data. And one of the things that you find with the application of digital tools, if it's applied well, I believe that it will help both sectors in managing their data in a much better, efficient way. So that's one aspect that these sectors need to look into, how they can go about to integrate digital tools into their project delivery. And just to give you an example, when we look into the aspect of digital tools, we're looking at it in terms of how they can go about to apply, for instance, artificial intelligence, how they can go about as well to apply machine learning. And the integration of digital tools, it is not just about how you go about to process the data. We can use these tools to manage our risk. And I think the application of digital tools, what it will do as well, if it is done well in the integration of these projects, it will assist the private and the public sector to better manage their risk. The second thing that the private and the public sectors need to improve on is how they go about to integrate sustainability practices. I think one of the things that you find is that when we talk about sustainability practices, we look at it from an economical, social, and environmental. However, when it comes to the delivery of these projects, in terms of sustainability practices, the economic side in terms of the appraisal has been done well. And you'll find that in terms of the appraisal process which has been carried out in a lot of projects, there has been much success because organizations have had better understanding of what is required economically. However, when it comes to the social and environmental aspect, there's still more that needs to be done, especially from a risk point of view. So what is required is that both the private and the public sector need to have a better understanding of how they can go about to apply the social and environmental aspect of sustainability. If it is done well, it will assist them to manage their social risks and environmental risks. And most importantly, it will enhance their project resilience. The third part that the sectors need to focus on is the aspect of legislative changes. And this mainly falls under governments. I think from a policy point of view, you find that the private sector have faced challenges, especially from a government perspective. And I'll give you a good example. If we have a look into what has happened in the UK with autonomous vehicles, some time back the government came up with a policy which manufacturers decided, they were going to implement that policy into their portfolios. However, just recently, the UK government decided to refine their policy. This has a huge impact on some of their portfolio, on some of the manufacturing portfolios for the car manufacturers. So I think that from a legislative point of view, there has to be closer relationship between the government and the private sector in order for them to look into how they manage these changes and to ensure that the changes which are being made do not have a negative impact on portfolios which are in the form of projects or in the form of programs. The other thing that the sectors need to focus on as well is the aspect of governance. And I think one of the things that you find is that from a delivery point of view, the sectors have done well to ensure that, from a governance point of view, the practices are implemented the way they're supposed to be implemented. However, if you have a look into some of the projects which have been delivered universally, you'll find that a lot of the failures have been primarily because of governance practices not implemented the way they're supposed to be implemented. So I think that in terms of just making sure that the projects are not negatively impacted with governance, these sectors need to look into how they can go about to ensure that governance practices are implemented the way they're supposed to be implemented so that they do not have negative impact on the delivery of the project. And just to give you a brief overview, when we talk about governance, we look at governance in the form of risk. So I think that in terms of making sure that the governance practices are implemented the way they're supposed to be implemented, both sectors need to come up with frameworks which will have a positive impact and not a negative impact. And lastly, in terms of what needs to be done now, I think the other thing that you'll find is that when we talk about risk in terms of delivery internally, and what do I mean by internally? The internal side of project management, when you're managing a project, you have to decide, or you look into the strategic issues that need to be considered. You also need to look into the operational issues and the project issues. This is something that needs to be done at organizational level. However, from an external point of view, one of the things that you'll find, especially now when it comes to delivery of projects, there is a need to have a better understanding of climate risk. When we talk about climate risk, it is attached to sustainability. So you can see that the connection between climate risk and sustainability, there is a correlation between the two. And in my view, in terms of moving forward, there is a need as well for these sectors to have a better understanding of what needs to be done from a climate risk perspective. So just to summarize this brief presentation, one of the things that I just want to point out is that what is it that needs to be done next? I think in terms of what needs to be done next, number one, both sectors need to work in a collaborative way. And in terms of them working in a collaborative way, they need to look into practices that will be required to ensure that the projects are being delivered successfully. In terms of these sectors working in a collaborative way, one thing that also needs to be considered is the aspect of risk. I believe that in order for these sectors to work in a much better way, there also needs to be a need of how they can look into how they go about to share the risk. This is just from a practice point of view. Now, what is it that we now need to do from a research point of view? I think from a research point of view, there is a need for more research to be done to look into how sustainability practices can be implemented into projects. There is also a need to look into how the application of digital tools can be implemented successfully to ensure that better outcomes are achieved. The third thing that needs to be looked into as well is the aspect of capital efficiency or capital effectiveness. When we talk about capital effectiveness, we look at it in the form of ensuring that you deliver your project at a lower cost, as well you minimize the waste and you achieve quality. So from a research point of view, if you have a look into some of the projects which have been delivered in these two sectors, one of the things that you'll find is that they've had huge problems with the aspect of achieving cost efficiency. So I think that from a research point of view, there is a need as well for them to look into, or there's a need for the research community to have a look into how capital effectiveness can be achieved in the delivery of projects in both the private and the public sector.